For those of you who don't know, I have been commissioned by the estate of Mr. Bernie Worrell to write his official biography. Bernie was best known as the keyboard player for Parliament-Funkadelic in the 70s, but he also recorded on more than 500 records, which means he has a lot of other projects, a lot of other bands. One of my favorites involves my guest today. He's a bassist, he's a glass artist, he's a very nice person, and he has a lot of information. From Seattle, we have Mr. Preston Singletary. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
Excellent. I appreciate you being here. We are going to focus on Bernie's work with your band, but first, I would like you to tell our friends out here a little bit about yourself. Tell us about your musical background.
So yeah, I'm 59. I started playing piano when I was about 11. I was attracted to the music of Scott Joplin, and I tried to emulate, or learn to play a few of those compositions. And but then in about high school, I switched to guitar. It's closer to the musical styles that I was interested in. Um, of course, Jimi Hendrix and Blue Oyster Cult of all things. That was the first rock show I ever saw in my life, and
Got to
as
start
a
somewhere.
young teenager. The Who, but then I started getting into soul funk music, Earth, Wind and Fire, and Ohio Players, and uh, so in about mid '80s, I switched to bass guitar because the excellent bass player that we were playing with left the group, and I was so enamored with this slap style of bass that I thought I wanted to learn how to do it. And so each time I kind of picked a new instrument, I kind of turned my back on the other one, and so I all but lost all my keyboard, piano skills, and a little bit of guitar I can still play, but primarily I focus on the bass since the mid 80s. I've been playing in a lot of bands in Seattle. Never really got much outside of Seattle. Played a lot in the Northwest for many years, but then I'm a glass blower by trade, so I make glass art, and so it's always been kind of like a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and so finally I got married. Kind of put my musical aspirations on the side. I focused on my artwork and tried to make a living. Tried to, you know,
Right.
eventually had kids. Had a couple of kids. Now, about I would say late. Well, actually, early 2000s, I started a group called Little Big Band,
Hmm.
and at that point, because my career was coming around, you know, if,
It happens.
there you go.
It
Yeah,
happens.
life in real time here.
Yes, sir.
Um, the dogs are barking. Anyways, the so what? I guess long story short, I wanted to um, kind of turn my focus towards native culture because it was the basis of. I'm a Tlingit tribal member, but I grew up in Seattle, so I grew up around music. I grew up around glass. Glass is a big thing here. Um, uh, and my career focused on me connecting to my cultural background of my Tlingit culture. So I wanted to work with native musicians, and so I was thinking of a funk soul group, thinking that would be a really cool thing. Um, and so we kind of played around, but again, not really career pushing it career wise, just as a kind of an elated hobby until I met Bernie Worrell in 2013. And that was what led me to start this group, Khu.éex, which is, it translates to potlatch in the Tlingit language. And so potlatch, to kind of oversimplify the meaning, is, it's a sharing of culture, stories, history, dance, music, all of the above. And it's really a very elaborate ceremony where a lot of things happen. Tribal politics are ironed out, names are given, totem poles are raised in honor of deceased chiefs and family members. And there's a lot of gifting, a lot of giving away of objects, and the only way you could elevate your status in the community was to give it all away. And that's in the old world way. That's how things were done. That's how you became an important individual in the community. So that being said, I was collaborating with Tlingit tribal members, Gene Tagavan, Clarissa Rizal, and I invited them onto this this music project when I met Bernie, and so to bring some really really deep substance into the group, from their perspective, because they grew up very traditionally. They
Right.
grew up in the community. They grew up learning the stories and participating with ceremony and all of that, and learning the songs and dancing and doing theater groups and learning the culture on a very deep level. So, with them by my side and me being kind of like the curator, bringing all these musicians together, this is how the group sort of came together. And Bernie was right in there with us, and it was an incredible experience. It was, I learned a lot. Of course,
Right.
one can't but help learn by being around a man like that. He's just an incredible individual. Just really, really generous soul, and really put a lot of effort into this project.
Right. And the way you met Bernie is an interesting story in and of itself. How did that come to pass?
Yeah, so I was about to turn 50, so I was 49. And I saw this Kickstarter campaign roll out, and it was Bernie Worrell was trying to get a tour bus. So he was fundraising for this tour bus, and so basically, I was fairly ambiguous about turning 50. My wife thought like, "Oh, you're gonna, we're gonna travel. What do you want to do?" And I saw that. I said that I want Bernie Worrell to play my 50th birthday party. So I made a little inquiry, and then Judy called me up right away. Said, "Hey, you expressed interest in this. If you commit, then we're going to make our goal. So we're really anxious to make that goal, because Kickstarter, if you don't make your goal, you lose it. You lose everything. You
Right.
lose all the commitments and money that people put up." So I said, "Well, okay, I think I want to do this." And she goes, "Well, what do you do, by the way? Are you a lawyer?" And I said, "No, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know where you got that. I'm a glass artist, but I'm also a musician. I
Right.
so I said, I've got this native funk group called Little Big Band." She goes, "Well, you guys should open up for Bernie. This is going to look good on your resume." And I said, I checked my calendar. Lo and behold, we were available. Everybody was available. Of course, I was excited
Sure.
to do this, and I wanted to connect with them. I wanted to bring them over to my studio. I didn't know where it would lead, but I just said, "Hey, because Judy said, she's like, oh, I do stained glass, and Bernie and I are both part Cherokee, and blah blah blah, and all this stuff." I said, "Well, you guys got to come to my studio. I want to show you around. I want to host you, and spend some time with you, and all that." So I brought the whole band over to the studio, and Judy showed up, and they toured the studio, and I showed them all my artwork, and I gave them a bunch of stuff, and so. Driving Bernie around in the car, and I'm flipping on my CD, and and then this thumping bass, like boom, 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 and then he looks at it, he just cracks up, He's sitting in the passenger seat, just like I said, "Yeah, this is my group," It was a captive audience, So I played him some tracks and stuff. This was before, so this was the night after. He played the party. It was my birthday party, and then the
Right.
next night, or the next day we visited, and then we went and did the show with him, opened up for Bernie Worrell Orchestra. Um, and that's where we hit it off. We just like, I think it was over a cigarette, of course, you know, because he had run out, and I just happened to smoke his brand at the time. So I guess he. Uh, so we sat there and just looked at the artwork and stuff, and that's how we connected. And at that, so what happened was at the end of the night, when we opened up for the Bernie Worrell Orchestra, we were parting ways, and I said, thank you for coming out, and it was just incredible. And he goes, yeah, I've been thinking about your music, and I got some ideas, we've got to get together and work on some stuff, and I was, wait a minute, you're talking to me? Wait, I was like looking over my shoulder, and so he says, yeah, I just called Judy and set it all up, and I said, okay, I'm gonna make this happen, Um, so like a little part of the story I left out was like the first night when I was welcoming Bernie Worrell Orchestra to the stage. I hadn't met Bernie yet. I hadn't. They arrived late, so I sang my traditional song, and I sang this song, and he and I just said, welcome to Seattle. So he sits down on his Rhodes, and he starts playing this chords and playing that little melody and turning it upside down and backwards, and then he started playing the organ, and it turned into this kind of symphonic classical thing, and then he started playing his synthesizers, and it got psychedelic, and then it was just like boom, launched right into one of their songs. That's how. And I was like, my jaw was just dropping to the ground. I was listening to him, reinterpret this melody in many different ways and change it and morph it, and then it was just. And I was like, this is cool. This is great. This is what I was thinking of at that point. Maybe that's what put the idea in my head, was to take traditional melodies, traditional songs that come from the culture, and then we would figure out the chord structure underneath it, and then we would reinterpret it with kind of a different way, jazzy ways, funk
Right.
jazz. So that's kind of what stuck in my head, and then we pulled it off. Brought him out. So that was August, and I brought him out in December. So it was just a few months later that I was pretty excited to do this, and that's how it all came together in the first place.
I would imagine it's an interesting leap for somebody who's coming at it from the outside to go from a native language into a more funk oriented language. How big of a leap is that musically in your head?
Well, it's the first session that we did it, it was interesting because I would take the melodies. So I asked my friend Gene Tagaban, and Clarissa Rizal, to sing some songs for me, and so I tried to figure out the chord structures underneath them to kind of support the melody, and it was really intuitive, and organic the way that we did it. And when we did that in the studio, we didn't really rehearse anything. I mean, we just kind of. I had a couple of riffs, and they were gonna fit with the melodies. And of course, you don't need to tell Bernie what to play or anything.
Right.
He just feels it, And between him and CirdecSongs, the saxophone player, that was an old friend of mine, he was involved, and then it was Stanton Moore. So the four of us led the whole. That first session, it was just the four of us on the instruments, and then
Right.
two singers. And later on, we brought in this Captain Rob, who he's a Blackfoot native, and he spends a lot of time. Well, he's a real musician who can write music and write out passages and understands chord voicings and all this stuff. I'm you know I'm a bass player. I'm not that deep into theory. I'm just more of an intuitive player.
Understood.
Um, and he's able to. He's done a lot of this kind of analyzing, Blackfoot music and thinking about how you know the melodies are based on the words, and they don't necessarily follow Western constructs of music the way we think about it. So he's able to break it down, and in some cases later on in our history we get into a little bit of that. And so in any case you get into odd time signatures and things like that. And so there can be some work to understand that. And our drummer as well, Ed Littlefield, the new drummer that we've been working. He's become the full-time drummer. He's from the Tlingit culture as well, and actually we're from the same kind of house group up in Sitka, Alaska. And he's been interpreting Tlingit melodies in jazz for 10 years, and he actually played with one of the Marsalis brothers, and they have this native jazz quartet, they call it. And so he's actually breaking it down real specifically, and transcribing all these melodies and then playing compositions around them. It's really fascinating.
That is amazing. Now, you guys recorded a lot of material, and I based that just on the release of the 4 records. And I say records because they're actually on LP, and there are multiple sides to every release, which is a wonderful thing. How did you go about paring down what you wanted to use in terms of compositions?
So Rob was really instrumental in that, because at one point we had so much material that was just getting to be, I don't know, how do you dig your way out of this and make any sense of it? But by the time we brought Rob in on the second session, that we did a total of 4 recording sessions with Bernie, and they were all about 5 to 7 days long. And so in the beginning, we would just walk in, or let's go in with this kind of vibe or this kind of idea, or let's start something with the flute, and then you guys just come in.
Right.
Like, okay, here's me just kind of hanging on to the pony's tail, just trying to survive, because like I said, I'm not the most complex when it comes to playing bass melodically, but that was okay because it allowed for a lot of expansion from the chord instruments. By just hanging with a root and a riff,
Right.
Bernie could like take it in so many different directions. You can hear that in his music, all over his music. And so where was I going with that?
Just how many hours you put together. Well, you have to be motivated, even if you don't know where it's going to go. There has to be some level of
So we were improvising,
Right.
and it would start with a story, and sometimes the story would come in, and we would be kind of feeling it out, reacting to, the cadence of the story and the crescendo of the story, or different moments that Bernie would highlight. He was really intuitive that way. If you listen to some of those storytelling pieces, it's fascinating because you can hear Bernie kind of chiming in with like little things, like he's little melodies that you know, that instantly resonate with, well, at least with me, um, just like a little chord or something. Um, and anyway, he was working really intuitively with the storyteller, and if you listen closely, you can hear that interaction going on, and it's
Right.
really cool. Yeah, so we had a lot of material. So long story short, my long story.
That's okay.
Rob would he kind of took those tracks and he distilled them, or he put them into categories, and he kind of found some common themes, and from that we kind of built the whole idea. Each album is kind of conceptual. It's sequenced in such a way that kind of leads you along, kind of in a prayerful way. Like some of them open up with a spoken word piece, and then it gets into different the different styles and genres, and so yeah, the it was Rob really kind of pulled those ideas together, found
That's
the
cool.
commonalities between each album.
And it doesn't hurt that Bernie. A lot of people don't know Bernie Worrell was a classically trained pianist for
Yep.
starters, and he had perfect pitch. So what he heard, he could play pretty much immediately. So there's got to be
Yep.
a lot of room for him to almost to figure things out before he got there, long before
Yep.
he got there.
Yeah. 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 I mean, he didn't. Yeah, he didn't. I mean, I think I sent him tracks, to listen to, but I don't think he listened to them. He just he didn't need to listen to them. It was just everything he did. He just did. He was just so in the moment, with his uh, what was happening with the music and the energy and the whole energy level of the music and where we were trying to take it. And it was always, it's just such a, it's such a unique thing to be in that spontaneous moment with him, because it was unlike any other time I'd played music with people. It just, there was something that was so perfect about it that it just made sense. And, and I was telling Bernie, I was like, yeah, well, we're trying to figure out, which tracks to use, which ones are good. Do we want to use like the very best of what we made, we did? And he goes, it's all good. It's all good. Everything we did is good. And he's right in a lot of ways. There was so many moments. We used about 90%, 95% of what we recorded. Some of the stuff didn't work out for whatever reason, but you know,
But
it was.
still, there's plenty here. So
Yep.
let's talk about some of these records, shall we? You opened it with a 2016 release called "The Wilderness Within."
Yeah.
When you think about that, what are some of the highlights that stick out to you?
Well, this album was called "The Wilderness Within," and this was a moment when Clarissa, who was she was a weaver. She was a traditional weaver, but she was also very spiritual. She was I call her a shaman. She was, and I wanted her involved absolutely with the music because um, I felt that she would bring a lot to it, and she did. She was. Um, we go out and we would sing a song and they'd do some scratch vocals, and then we'd come back and we'd listen to it, and she'd be weaving on this loom that she had. It was a hand weaving process, traditional chilcat weaving. And, Randall would crank up the speakers and like, it'd hit you in the chest, the bass and the bass drum and all that stuff. And it was just powerful. And the very first song we ever wrote was called "Going North." The road was the first thing we recorded, and it was can't remember if it's on "Wilderness Within" or not, but Clarissa said this is like an awakening. This is like awakening a wilderness within, and she said this could be really powerful. In terms of for our people, something that
Right.
would bring a new dimension to these traditional way of singing, and so that's I thought that's a perfect title for an album.
And for
Um,
those of you playing at home, Going North is the third track on this particular record.
yeah, yeah. And the other one that I think that in my opinion really kind of signifies the band uh, is called Angry Bear.
Uh-huh.
Angry Bear to me is kind of that's an example of Rob came up with that first riff. I think it's like in 10/4 or something, and he said that's an example of the you know like a powwow song that just ends and then starts again after the words are said or sung in a certain way. And that was like how native music was. That's why it doesn't like follow the constructs of Western music. And
Right.
so that was one of his examples of how he would take that melody and turn it into this kind of power riff, and so that's how we collaborated. He came up with a part A, and I would come up with the B part, or vice versa. And we'd write, choruses or bridges to each other's riffs, and then we'd
Right.
say, what do you think? And then usually it was just like that. Well, that fits. That works really well. And so we did that on every song. It's very, most every song is very collaborative that way. Um, Kicking ideas back and forth. But yes, there's a couple of highlights off that album that I really like.
Excellent. And there are bands who like to play in such a way, even when they're improvising, where they want to throw one another off. This sounds like a group that was more centered around the groove. Find the center and play
Yeah,
from there.
yeah. I mean, what I was really hoping for was try to emulate kind of a funkadelic kind of psychedelic Parliament-Funkadelic sound. I mean, that's what I've always dreamed about, having like a big group of native people up on stage, and in a very theatrical way, do a lot of bringing out masks and dancing the masks and all that stuff, and um, just haven't had a big enough stage to do that yet.
Nice, nice. The next year, in case you hadn't absorbed all of the stuff from the first record, the very next year, you have a record called They Forgot They Survived, released in 2017. What was the theme around that?
Yeah, the theme of "They Forgot They Survived" was kind of like talking about intergenerational trauma. Um, the fact is that is kind of a self-reflection on Native people towards themselves, and from non-Native people towards Native people. So it's
Right.
kind of the idea that they forgot they survived. There was another spoken word piece by Clarissa. Actually, there's a spoken word piece that she does on that one, and we thought that too was a really good title for the album, because I'm living in Seattle. My culture is from Alaska. Rob's he's from like Oklahoma, but he grew up in the Northwest, and so so the whole thing about being like Rob, for instance, is very light skinned native, and so that kind of judgment of other natives towards light skinned natives, the whole idea that we have persevered, and we have survived through these generations of change and psychological effect, and how do we navigate that, both from within inside and outside. So so a lot of those songs were based on those kinds of uh, concepts, and yes, we again, there was Rob's masterwork on that in terms of
Right.
you know
And
Jack Troy thinking.
Bernie's just a constant presence throughout, more or less.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, the music was that was the real joy, the joyful part of playing it. It was very organic. It was very improvisational. Some of those tracks were quite long. They could have been 15 minutes long, but we
Right.
edited them down to like 8 or 10, 10 minutes. So
It's
we have
very
a hard time.
progressive rock of you, actually.
Yeah, we have a hard time doing songs that are less than like 7 minutes long.
Right.
But we get like this whole Earth Prayer is one track off that album that I think is really incredible. A spoken word piece by Gene Tagaban, talks about Raven, coming back after a long journey, and it's like instead of trees, there's like buildings, so he's like, where are my people? And then he ends up communing with this tree that's been cut down and is washed out to sea. He comes back, and it's all heavy with this emotion. The metaphor of it. So Raven's sitting on this tree, and as the sun warms the Raven and this log, this tree, it's kind of getting all the moisture out of this log, and it kind of like Raven and the tree, they wept together. It was sort of like that, the final line in that story, and that's one that's really really cool, like that interaction between Bernie and the storyteller. That one, it's another great thing that that was completely improvised. We just I think it was getting to be like 7 o'clock, and we were all kind of hungry. I was like, well, let's try one more. So we tried this really mellow piece. It became sort of like a slow droney blues kind of feel, and we were just kind of like you know just kind of meditating on this riff and stuff. And then when he started telling the story, we were like, whoa, okay, something going on here. And then, Skerrick would like, chime in with the sax and kind of play, in contrast to, the flute or the words that were being said. Incredible.
Nice. Very nice. Now, did people call out keys they were looking for, or was it just one of those things where you just started playing?
Yeah, I mean, we tried to, all roads lead to E, but
It is the easiest stuff, chord to
yeah,
improvise over.
but anyways, we tried to deliberately mix it up. Some of the when we came in with a riff or something, we really tried to think about changing the key. So, you know, just sort of trying to figure out what our tonal center was. There's a lot of songs in F sharp, and so Rob was like, did Bernie come up with that? I was wondering if it was like his tonal center was F sharp, because he had a lot of riffs in that key or not. I don't know, but so yeah, like the a lot of the songs that have a little bit more structure to them, we kind of would loosely throw out an arrangement, and then try to follow it as we did like one take or two takes maybe,
Makes
at
sense.
the most.
Makes sense. We are going to fast forward to 2020. Now, for the record, Bernie passed away in 2016, so you're working with what's already been recorded.
Yep.
You've got
Yep.
all this material here. So in 2016, you release a record, and I'm going to mispronounce it because there's an accent on the first E. So I see Heen. What do
Heen.
you
Yeah, yeah.
know? Okay.
You got it. Yeah.
Does that word have a specific meaning?
It means water or fresh water specifically.
I got
So
it.
yeah, so it's a song that's based on water. Or I mean, sorry, an album. The theme is based on water, and at the time when we were overdubbing, we did a lot of overdubs. It took us a long time to sort of get to the point of, having the funds to go back in and re-record, or overdub, horns and everything. And there was the Dakota Pipeline uh, issue that was going on. It was the standoff for the water rights, the water protectors, and
Right.
so we had one member that actually had gone out there to to the Dakotas, and he brought some of that water back, and we just kind of like put it in the space, and we were just thinking about it, and because we knew that this whole album was based on water, so a lot of those songs on Heen, the song to the water protectors, and Shall Know is kind of a political piece about the oil companies that are just running rampant, and just destroying the environment, what have you.
And
Killer
those kind
Whale
of
creation song.
right.
Yeah.
Those issues like that have to elicit feeling, a visceral type feeling that goes directly into the music. No.
Yeah. I mean, one of the singers on the group, or he was doing a lot of singing and spoken word. Nahan, he was very politically active, and kind of confrontational in a lot of ways, and had a lot of thoughts and feelings around that. He made Shall Know is a pretty powerful spoken word piece, I think, and so it fit right into the theme of the album. So that's how we came up with that.
Interesting. Interesting. It's always nice to have a cause to back up what it is you're playing because it centers itself a little more quickly that way, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these songs were, as we started like, filter through the different songs, we realized at one point that they did sort of reflect different kinds of themes, and so we got really lucky in that way. Sometimes they were just sort of placeholder names. We would just kind of come up with some random random thing like you know what's an example. Well, I don't know. We knew we wanted to do a song to the water protectors, and that was one of the titles. The Raven's First Dance it's kind of a rainy. If you think about the imagery that is talked about in the story, Raven's all wet and he kind of crawls into the den of a bear, to warm himself, and yeah, so all of that was going on. Um, yeah, a lot of real winners on that one. That
Excellent.
particular.
Well, I've heard the record, and you're not lying. There are a ton of winners on there. It's each album you just seem to build with more and more sophistication and more direction and more ambition more than anything else. They're really ambitious records, but
Yeah.
unlike some records you hear where people go for it, they don't quite get there. It seems to me you arrived where you wanted to get more often than not.
Yeah, I mean, it was quite. Again, it's hard to say that we all I really wanted to do was to just create music with Bernie. I mean, every time we you know did a session, it was just something that was so it just unified everything that we wanted to do. I mean, between me and Rob, we were both huge fans, and I guess we were getting kind of greedy at some point. We want, but
You had plenty to choose from.
yeah, Bernie was so such a willing participant. I think he really got into the native culture. I mean, we would be doing a song, and then we'd come back, and then we'd be talking about the words and what they were all about, or the story, or the intent of the story. And it just got into these, conversations and sharing stories, and all kinds of things came out. And it was, and Bernie was right in there. He was just fascinated to learn about all this, all this culture. It was a little different than, a lot of the other musicians. I mean, I'm sure everywhere he went, when he played with Middle Eastern musicians, and I mean, I'm sure that was the same kind of vibe just that we were, yeah, we were a bunch of Native Americans, and
I
he
say this
yeah,
when you're talking. I think in the most positive way possible. I consider you musical co-conspirators.
yeah, that's right,
Everybody,
that's right.
the agenda just kind of lined up, and everybody was going in the same direction.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and I saw this as a real opportunity, just to because I saw the value in preserving. Um, well, I didn't know at the time, but just I like recording because it's kind of a snapshot of that time and space where you're
Right.
at, and it'll change and grow and morph. But this is and so that's what we're doing currently. But this is we still have all this music to reflect on that we made with Bernie, which is I don't know, I think is super special.
I would tend to agree. 2021. Hard to believe that was almost 2 years ago now. Time is
Yeah.
going far too fast. I'm going to say finally, but I'm sure that there's more music out there somewhere. We'll call this the latest record to date. Is called Wooch, and it's significant. I'm stealing the first half of this anecdote because Bernie was known as the Wizard of Woo, WOO in all caps. So the final
Correct.
record is called Wooch, but that also has a double meaning, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, it means in the Tlingit word of people came together, and
Gotcha.
so I thought of that hybrid word. It was a perfect kind of send off for the final batch of the cream of the crop is like I'm saying, and that fit into the third album. We didn't have space for the third or the sixth side is a vinyl etching.
Right,
All
right.
of the other albums have like a etching on one side, but this one was there was too much stuff to include, and yeah, that one kind of goes all over the map. I mean, that's almost like our kind of swan song, so to speak, because
Right.
it's got the funkiest tracks, in my opinion. You got like 10,000 Generations. It's kind of an Afro pop, you know, Afro beat kind of jam. You've got some heaviness like Residential School, kind of like a real atmospheric thing. Uh, you
I'm
know,
gonna I'm gonna jump in because my very favorite Khu.éex song is on this record, and that's G Yourself,
G
which is,
yourself, yeah,
my
yeah,
God, that is the most
yeah.
P-Funk tune that you guys did, in my opinion. Now,
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
may
No,
see it
that
differently.
is an awesome track. In fact, we've been trying to perform it, at gigs. It's a pretty, there's so much horns going on, and it's just so full. It's really crazy to try to recreate that song, without without the wizard.
Right, right.
He had to work his magic on all that stuff. The other one was, was it the spiritual warfare?
Okay.
Yeah, that's another one that I really like. That kind of also has, kind of reflects on the P Funk style a bit. Then you got stuff like concept of time itself, and
Hmm.
or Holy Drone is kind of like spiritual jazz. Um, I mean, that album kind of goes all over the place, but I think it's the most complex album. It's one of the most it's one of the most varied albums, and one of the one of my favorites too.
It is. It's a classic to me, and more people need to know about that. And you
Yeah,
mentioned you're performing these songs live now, and you're doing
yeah.
it obviously without Bernie. Is there pressure? Do you feel the need to reach a certain level of expectation?
Well, it's our keyboard player. He put it pretty plainly. He goes, "Well, I joined up with this group, and to replace." Bernie Worrell. He goes, well, what does that even mean? I mean, you can't even say that word. It's like so he's got his own style. He's a little more jazz influenced. Tim Kennedy is the new keyboard player, and that is so we just kind of take it as it goes. I mean, it's definitely a new interpretation.
Right, right.
It's mostly challenging for the horns because they've got, I mean, I think there's like 5 or 6 overdubs of horns on that, and so at best we've got like 2 horn players on stage, and so it's hard to make it that full. And of course the keyboards are interpreted in a new way. They're not. We don't try to recreate every single aspect of it based on the keyboards that you might have access to or whatever. So it changes, becomes more of like a that our path is to just kind of go take it in a little bit different direction.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah.
I am going to just about let you off the hook with this. What did you take away from your time with Bernie? What's the biggest thing that you remember taking away from it? Was it an approach to music? Was it a mindset? What did you take away from that?
Yeah, I developed a lot more confidence around my playing. When playing with Bernie, I mean, he was so.
The dog might not agree. I don't know.
I mean, Bernie was like my dog's trying to answer for me here.
Everyone's a critic.
I yeah, I mean, I just found a lot more confidence and a lot of joy around playing, and I thought about things in a completely different way, and I didn't have time to judge myself, as far as like thinking like, well, I'm not like a I'm not a virtuoso player, I in the end of the day, you play how you play,
Right.
and Bernie and I felt like I would call him intermittently, when he was around, and when talking about getting together, how we were going to make this new have another recording session or whatever we were going to do, and that was so we just had this really intense, I mean, it wasn't like a deep friendship, but I could call him and he'd pick up and we'd just have a chat, and
Right.
it was incredible. I mean, to be around a guy like that, his stories, his words of encouragement, his support of us, as a group, and I believe that he was, into this project 100%, and you can hear it in the music. I mean, he's got
Absolutely.
2 to 3 tracks of keyboards on every track, pretty much, and so he showed us the joy around just playing, and we were able to witness these, amazing magic moments of just creativity. It was something that I'll never forget.
It's a beautiful thing indeed. Uh,
Standing, looking through the window, like just watching him play something, a Moog solo or whatever, and it was just like everybody was just like, it was
it's
incredible.
almost you're almost starstruck even as you're standing there as a peer, more or less.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, that's wonderful. I thank you for your time, Preston.
right on.
Your music is available on Bandcamp, which is the preferred method of consumption, I would imagine. And ability.
Bandcamp, yep. Yeah, you can also, we have a website you can order vinyl from. We're about ready to do. Oddly enough, our demographic is into CDs.
Yeah,
Like, you
let's
don't have
see.
CDs? I thought that was a thing of the past. So we're going to do a CD release. We're going to try to do a box set. We do have a new album coming out that would be the first post Bernie recording release. It'll be probably the middle of the year, and then but we're going to be going in and recording, I guess, what would be our sixth album.
Excellent.
And there's going to be a few bonus tracks coming out too, a few extra Bernie tunes, that are tracks that are Bernie's featured on.
Awesome. Well, I'll be at the front of the line to get a copy. That much is certain. Preston Singletary, I can't thank you enough for your time. For everyone else out there, please consume this music because it is well worth your time. Like, share this video with other people. Be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel as I shamelessly plug myself. And leave a few comments once you hear the music because you're not going to regret it. Preston, I thank you so much for your time, and you take care of yourself.
Right on. Thank you.